2022 is the final year of the Sword and Shield era of the Pokemon trading card game, but it's not going out in a whimper. 2022 saw the introduction of V-Star Pokemon, which evolved from Pokemon V, only dropped 2 prizes, and they have almost the health of a VMAX. We also saw Radiant Pokemon, which definitely made an impact on the game, and I wanted to take some time to showcase the best cards of 2022. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's talk about the best cards of 2022. Now, some quick ground rules before we go into this. One, we are focusing on competitive play. I'm not necessarily talking about the collector prices of alt arts and stuff, though there were some fantastic alt arts this year. I'm also limiting this to the cards that were released in 2022. Yes, Mew VMAX had a big year this year. Yes, Shady Dealings did great, Path to the Peak, and so on. Let's focus on the cards of 2022. And I think last but not least, stick around at the end. I just wanted to ramble a little bit. It's been a banner year for In Third Person on YouTube, and I wanted to share my thanks and talk about the future of the channel. So let's go into some of the best cards from this year. I'm going to go in order of release, so it's not necessarily ranked because that'd be really hard. Also, I think if we were to rank them, I think this is the #1 card of 2022. Arceus VSTAR, phenomenal card, 280 HP, only drops 2 prizes, and its incredible Starbirth ability allows it to get 2 cards, any 2 cards from the deck, put them into your hand. And on top of that, with Trinity Nova doing 200 damage, most of the time it's doing 180 with double turbo energy, you're doing a solid amount of damage and you're accelerating energy to a Pokemon V on the bench. This was crazy. This very much shaped the meta for the entire year, opened the door for so many different Pokemon cards that just didn't have an opportunity to shine because there was no way to accelerate energy to them in an efficient enough manner. From Duraludon, Goodra, Flying Pikachu, there are so many, Malamar. There were so many different Pokemon V that found life or new life thanks to Arceus VSTAR, that this became like the MVP of 2022. Yes, maybe it's not the best deck right now or what have you, but when you think about its impact on the game, absolutely massive. Congratulations, Arceus. You had a banner year this year. Lumineon V is basically Tapu Koko, where you put this on the board and you can grab a supporter card from your deck, put it into your hand. Really handy card. Most of the time you have this as a one-of in your deck, and I think this is going to see more play with Crobat on the way out. There was a few weeks in 2022 where Whimsicott VSTAR was a legitimate threat. Yes, it has low HP, but with 2 energy attachments, you were doing 140 damage, and you could stop the attachment of Pokemon tools and special energy. This was an absolute nightmare for a number of decks, including Arceus, including Urshifu, where Urshifu had found its second wind with the Moltres package, and Whimsicott VSTAR just kind of ate it alive. And this came very close to winning a couple of tournaments and then proceeded to fall off the face of the earth. It's unfortunate that it can't really keep up with the meta right now, but for a couple of weeks, Whimsicott VSTAR had caught everybody off guard. Sharon's Care was a really handy supporter for colorless Pokemon, particularly Arceus VSTAR, where you can put one of your colorless Pokemon that has any damage counters on it back into your hand, and this was a way of looping Arceuses so you could keep them fresh on the board, which made the Arceus Inteleon deck so potent for such a long time this year. I actually think there's still some sauce with that deck when you put in Radiant Gardevoir and Lake of Vacuity and like a Big Charm and V-Guard energy to make a super tanky Arceus. I think that's something I want to tackle in the new year. My favorite, the Gucci belt, doing 30 more damage to Pokemon V. This was a pivotal tool in 2022, whether you were playing a V deck or a single prize deck. yes, you wanted an extra 30 damage against the field where most people are playing Pokemon V, and you're going to get extra value out of that. Everybody played this card. It was fantastic. It gave single prizers a bit more of a fair fight in that regard as well. And going forward, I think we're going to see less of Choice Belt as EXs start to get a foothold on the meta. We would likely see Choice Belts cool off, but Choice Belts had an amazing run in 2022. How about the world champion Bibarel? Everyone was talking about Genesect. Oh, you're drawing too many cards. It's so cheap. And then here we go. Bibarel with the Industrious Incisors. You get to draw up to 5 cards. And yes, you're drawing a little less than Genesect when it has a full bench of Fusion Strike Pokemon. But Bibarel was an engine that pretty much any deck archetype could run. It had a lot of success, including with Arceus. And yeah, Arceus, Bibarel, Marnie Path, such a killer combination. All the other Pokemon kind of don't matter with Bibarel drawing you cards in so many other deck archetypes. This card was awesome. DTE's Double Turbo Energy, being able to count as 2 colorless energy, helped out so many decks. Lugia, Arceus is the biggest one, of course, but so many other decks got benefits from being able to attach 2 energy at once. And yes, you took a penalty of 20 damage, which doesn't make it as good as, say, the double colorless energy from back in the day, but this was the one that was available in Standard and was allowed to be used on Pokemon V, unlike Twin Energy, and this card was incredibly impactful in the meta. Mew VMAX used this as well. Oh my goodness, turning Mew VMAX into a deck that can hit for 200 plus damage with Choice Belts and Power Tablets and 1 attachment. Absolutely nuts. Moving over to Astral, Radiance, and we have to talk about Palkia VSTAR. What a stud. It was the meta defining card for a long stretch this year because it was so strong. Subspace Swell, being able to hit for up to 260 damage if both benches were full, which they oftentimes were. Being able to throw a Choice Belt and other modifiers, this could one-hit KO pretty much anything in the game. And then its Star Portal ability, being able to accelerate 3 water energy, 2 water Pokemon of your choice, gave it so many tactical options that other decks just didn't have. From being able to set up a second Palkia out of nowhere, being able to set up the first Palkia out of nowhere, being able to set up Kyurem VMAX, being able to set up Radiant Greninja to then do snipe damage, setting up the Articuno to do the paralysis. So many decks, or like so many, so much of the meta revolved around Palkia and all of the crazy things that it does. And recent times, it's kind of cooled off a little bit because of the likes of Lugia and Mew, but Palkia VSTAR has been and continues to be a force in the meta. One of, if not the best single prize deck to come out of 2022, the Regigigas deck, and we're going to use Regigigas to highlight the deck, but really Regigigas is the star of the show. This card, with its Ancient Wisdom ability, allowing you to accelerate 3 energy from the discard to your hand if all the other Regis were on the board. Absolutely nuts. When you had the whole suite of Regis set up, you could pretty much hit anything for weakness. Regigigas itself could hit for 300 damage against VMAX Pokemon. Throw a Choice Belt on there, you're one-hit KOing almost every VMAX in the game. And then there are even some decks that ran Regigigas outside of the Regigigas deck. Some Lost Box decks had it. Lugia sometimes has it as well. This card has been a juggernaut throughout the year as a basic single prize Pokemon, and it's awesome. One of the most annoying cards to come out of 2022, Miltank and its Miracle Body that is able to prevent all damage from Pokemon V. This is such an obnoxious card, but it helps the game. There are a number of decks that just don't have answers to this, and you will win games just because you put Miltank on the field and your opponent has no answer for it. It has won some tournaments here and there, mostly with Blissey, and it is an obnoxious card, and people do have ways around it or fighting through it, but Miltank made its presence felt in the Pokemon trading card game competitive scene for sure. The first batch of Radiant Pokemon included Radiant Greninja, which is still a top 2 Radiant Pokemon, arguably number 1. When I did my list on Radiant Pokemon, this was my number 1 pick. And what makes this card so special is it's a basic Pokemon that helps you draw cards, helps you discard energy when you want to reattach it or grab it by other means. And its Moonlight Shuriken attack for 2 water and 1 colorless energy does 90 damage of snipe, and it's pretty sick being able to do incremental damage or take big KOs from other Pokemon on the bench. This was an incredibly helpful tool in so many different decks, in Palkia, in Lost Box, and so many more. And even in Blissey, just to discard energy so that Blissey can attach it later. So many good uses for this card. It's fantastic. Is Roxanne a lie? Now, I personally don't like playing Roxanne in my decks, but it would be disingenuous to not include Roxanne on this list. For a game that really struggles with comebacks, Roxanne was kind of the only way you could come back from a deficit, where you play the Roxanne, both players shuffle their hands into their deck, you draw 6, they draw 2. And there have been many a game that have been won thanks to Roxanne. There have been games that have been lost where the 2 cards that your opponent got are exactly the 2 cards they need. However, its presence has been felt in the game, and for many players, this is a one of in their decks no matter what. For water decks, and some decks that aren't really water-based, Irida is ridiculously powerful. Being able to search your deck for a water Pokemon and an item card of your choice made it so you could grab crazy combinations of Pokemon and items and tools. And for decks like Palkia or Ice Rider or Kyurem, this was so essential to helping you get so many different cards, and you oftentimes got more than 2, especially if you're playing a Shady Dealings deck where you could then grab a Drizzile with one of those cards and then grab something else on top of that. Absolutely ridiculous. Irida is probably going to be a staple of water decks for the foreseeable future. Temple of Sinnoh is definitely finding more of a home in the current meta, with Lugia running around everywhere, but this is a disruptive card that turns all special energy into a single colorless energy. So taking those double turbos down to just 1 energy, taking out all the effects of hiding energy and aurora energy and so on. This has been and continues to be a factor in the game, and will likely be till rotation in April, and not because rotation is going to take this card away, but because a lot of the special energy is going to disappear next year. We're going on a trip with some trekking shoes, such a deceptively simple card that a number of decks make great use of. When you play the trekking shoes, you can look at the top card of your deck and you can either keep it or you can discard it and draw another one. And this was an opportunity to draw 1 or 2 more cards, helping you move through your deck even faster, getting to the pieces that whatever pieces you need in the moment. So really handy card. I use this in a couple of decks here and there. Now we move on to the Pokemon Go era of the game, and we can't sleep on the impact of this set. Radiant Charizard, for example, is a ridiculously strong attacker, where it has the Excited Heart ability that lowers its attack cost based on how many prizes have been taken, and a number of decks have figured out ways to make this card work. This won a major championship as the primary attacker. Shoutouts to Piper Lapine for an amazing win playing the Radiant Charizard Shady Dealings deck, but Radiant Charizard has found itself in all sorts of different decks, including Lost Box and Lugia, among many others. Solrock and Lunatone, yes, maybe the most annoying deck of 2022, but we cannot ignore these 2. You get energy into the discard pile, you use Sun energy from Solrock to attach it to Lunatone, and then Lunatone does decent damage. And this was the budget player's favorite deck, especially in a time where PTCGO is a thing and it's really hard to get the good cards, you could get Soul Rock and Lunatone for cheap, and you had a decent chance against much of the meta. Yes, Radiant Greninja would tear you apart, and Manaphy could only hold on for so long. And now Stoutland kind of gives you a problem here, taking 2 prizes with each knockout. But this was an archetype that definitely had its place in the meta for some time, and I cannot stand fighting this deck. We also got Pokestops out of Pokemon Go, where you flip the top 3 cards of your deck and keep any item cards that you get. This led to certain deck archetypes leaning heavily into items, while also giving you extra draw power and extra discard power as well. Now onto my favorite set of 2022, Lost Origin. It had so many great cards, and one of them was Comfey, which opened up a whole new Lost Zone engine to the game, where you were using Comfey's flower selecting ability to take a card and throw a card in the Lost Zone with combination of switch cards and scoop up nets and escape ropes. You're able to throw a bunch of cards in the Lost Zone and open up a whole bunch of different attacks and possibilities with your deck, such as Sableye. When you get 10 cards in the Lost Zone, you get to unlock Lost Mine, where you get to drop 12 damage counters anywhere you want. Now, this isn't necessarily the easiest card to play or the easiest deck to play, but Sableye just gives you so many insane attack options that just weren't available to any other decks before. So even though I cannot stand fighting against this card, I have to respect how good it is and the gameplay opportunities that it provides players with being able to just snipe wherever they want. Another staple of the Lost Zone decks is Cramorant with the Spit Innocently attack, which you can attack for free if you've got 4 cards in the Lost Zone. Almost always in the Lost Zone decks, you want to attack first with Cramorant. Even if you only attack once with Cramorant in the game, oftentimes that's good enough for the rest of your deck to carry you all the way to the end. But absolute staple card in Lost Zone box decks. The card that was supposed to be the feature, the heavy hitter of Lost Zone, Giratina VSTAR. Yes, it was very strong. 280 damage, throw 2 energy in the Lost Zone. And Star Requiem was ridiculous for 2 energy. You just get an instant knockout on anything in the active. But it never quite got there. People just found out that the Lost Zone box single prize versions were a little more potent in that they didn't have a 2 prize liability. You didn't have to worry about evolving up to Giratina VSTAR and getting bossed up early before you could do that. Didn't have to play around with any Thornton shenanigans, but this card is still very strong, and I still have a tough time fighting this one because of its massive damage potential. And you could play this in Arceus as well, which I always found to be a little clunky, but it is a deck that does work and can be very strong. For a time, it seemed like Kyurem VMAX was the future of water decks. I will admit, I was a little skeptical. I thought, this isn't going to be as good as Ice Rider. And as it turns out, it's better than Ice Rider. It has a little more HP. It has a great ability that helps it accelerate itself and others. And the lack of a damage cap made it hugely impactful to the game, where you could one-hit KO literally anything in the game if you've got enough water energy on there, and Palkia VSTAR certainly helped you on that front. Now, Kyurem VMAX has definitely cooled off, just struggling to keep up with some of the single prize decks, and Lugia gives it a hard time as well. But Kyurem VMAX is probably still the best way to play. I guess that's between Kyurem and Palkia. I probably would take Palkia straight up, but Kyurem VMAX still very strong. The worst nightmare of Mew VMAX players, Drapion, had a ridiculous ability, Wild Style, where this Pokemon's attack cost is lowered for each Fusion Strike, Rapid Strike, or Single Strike card in play. Pokemon in play, and Drapion, basically you just dropped into the game and knocked out a Mew VMAX and took an easy 3 prizes. It was ridiculous. Even then, Mew still kind of has ways around Drapion, and Mew is even playing Path to the Peak to try and counteract this. But Drapion, for any deck that you don't feel like you have a good time against Mew, you pretty much drop this in and you're good. Zoroark VSTAR was a very popular Pokemon on the PTCGO ladder. I still see this more online than Lugia, and there's a whole thing with the economy and stuff, and Zoroark's really cheap and Lugia's really expensive, but I understand why Zoroark is really popular. For only 2 energy, you do 50 damage times the number of Pokemon you have that have damage on them. And when you got the combo to work, Zoroark VSTAR could pretty much one-hit KO anything in the game, which made it really annoying to deal with. Of the videos I've done this year of the deck profiles, I think I have the worst record against Zoroark. In terms of competitive play, this has won like 1 major tournament and has placed okay in a couple of other ones, but the competitive community as a whole has cooled off on Zoroark VSTAR, and we don't see it as much, though on PTCGO, this is a deck that we still run into from time to time. A personal favorite of mine, Gudra VSTAR, criminally slept on. Rolling Iron for 200 damage, plus you take 80 less damage on the next turn, is such a good attack. And then its Moisture Star VSTAR ability helps you heal off one of your Gudras completely. Had a ton of fun playing this. Lost Zone Gudra is one of my favorite decks to play. The one that did win a major was Arceus Gudra, which has its benefits as well. It might even be tankier because of the use of Hyper Potions and stuff. But Hisuian Gudra VSTAR, awesome Pokemon. I hope that it gets some more shine in the future. A top 3 Radiant Pokemon, Radiant Gardevoir, saved many decks with its Loving Veil ability, allowing you to take 20 less damage from attacks from Pokemon V. The number of times I have been saved by this card and the number of times I screwed up the math and my opponent got saved because I didn't account for the Radiant Gardevoir is too many to account for, and this card is a great inclusion in a number of different decks. I imagine that it will start to cool off over time as EX Pokemon are introduced, but Radiant Gardevoir had a great 2022. Colress's Experiment was the lifeline to the Lost Zone box decks, being able to dig into your deck 5 cards deep, keep 3, throw 2 in the Lost Zone. Had multiple uses, and this ended up being a draw card outside of Lost Zone decks as well, further showcasing how valuable this card is as a draw supporter. Lost City was a favorite stadium for Mew VMAX, and I thought this was going to be used by more decks, honestly, but really it was mostly Mew VMAX that used Lost City, and it was great for dealing with single prize threats that you couldn't ordinary rod back once they were thrown in the Lost Zone. Lost Vacuum ended up becoming the de facto replacement for stuff like Tool Jammer and Tool Scrapper, where you could play Lost Vacuum and you could take out either one tool or one stadium and throw it into the Lost Zone. Another item in the Lost Box Toolkit, Mirage Gates, allowed players to accelerate energy from the deck directly to a Pokemon of their choice as long as you've got 7 cards in the Lost Zone. I loved experimenting with Mirage Gate. I built some really fun decks, including one with Lucario VSTAR, another one with Charizard VSTAR and VMAX. I have one with Zeraora that I'm looking to test out at some point. And there were just kind of like the Arceus factor where it opened the door for a Pokemon that wouldn't be able to get used now that they can cover the costs with Arceus. Mirage Gate kind of did the same thing, allowing many different Pokemon to shine that otherwise wouldn't. Last but not least, Silver Tempest. And I will say this is probably my least favorite set of 2022, but there are some big cards we have to talk about. None bigger than Lugia VSTAR, with its Summoning Star ability, being able to bench 2 colorless Pokemon of your choice. Of course, you get the Archeops on the board, which I'll flash here. You can accelerate 2 special energy cards to any Pokemon you want, and it allowed for some crazy combos. It allowed for Lugia to get a whole bunch of powerful colorless energy to hit for 300 damage. It allowed for Amazing Rare Eviltal to have an instant KO option, Amazing Rare Raikou to do 120 to the active and 120 to the bench. Allowed Radiant Charizard, if it got stuck in the active, you could attack with Charizard on the first turn. It was nuts. And I think that Lugia VSTAR is going to continue to dominate for the foreseeable future until rotation, at which point this deck becomes a massive question mark with so many of its core pieces rotating out. That being said, these next few months are definitely going to have Lugia on the throne. A personal favorite card of mine, Regidrago VSTAR, had pretty much no competitive viability, but I think this card is really good. Apex Dragon, being able to copy attacks from different dragon Pokemon. My personal deck has Appleton for the Lugia counter, Duraludon, VMAX, Goodra, and Giratina. And being able to choose between different attacks based on the scenario is really fun to use, and I personally like to use Leafeon and Rillaboom for energy acceleration, and it's so fun to play. It is, at the time of this recording, it is my go-to deck. I know it's not the best deck in the game, but it's so fun to play, and it can score some huge upsets against some of the best meta decks in the game, and I love it, and I hope to build this IRL at some point. Forest Seal Stone is such a helpful card for any Pokemon V decks that don't have a V-Star power. You use this card and you can grab a single card from the deck anytime you want. This made Mew VMAX even better. On top of already being good, this made a bunch of decks better, just being able to improve their consistency and basically have a half a V-Star power, or half an Arceus V-Star power, which made it awesome. Serena has become a staple in the current meta because it does so many different things. It discards cards, it lets you draw up to 5 cards, or it can be a gusting option, kind of like Boss's Orders, but only for Pokemon V. I think that Serena will start to cool off over time as the EX Pokemon start to take a hold of the meta, but I foresee Serena being a force in the game for the foreseeable future. And thus concludes our wrap-up of the best Pokemon cards of 2022. Are there any cards that I missed? I'm sure I did. Let me know in the comments, and I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments about card XYZ that I left out, or this card has potential, or I left out something super obvious. That could happen as well. And before we go, yeah, this is the final video. If you're watching this at the time of release, this is the final video of 2022. And it's been quite the year for In Third Person on YouTube. I have been recording videos and uploading live streams and putting content on this YouTube channel for over 12 years now. And 2022 was a breakout year for me. I think that with my shifting focus towards Pokemon TCG stuff, which I stumbled on, like I started playing the Pokemon trading card game about a year ago because I loved it. And then I started making Pokemon content, and even then I was averse to it because I was making content on other games like Tetris 99, and I was scared that people would leave because I was playing something else. But I just loved the Pokemon trading card game so much, and it completely took over my life that I decided to make the shift to just cover the game and make content about it because that's just what I love at the time. And it's been awesome to see your response to the videos that I've made this year. We've hit like record numbers in every conceivable metric, and I cannot thank you so much for the love, for the kind words in the comments. I think it warms my heart in particular where I see comments from people who are just getting into the Pokemon trading card game and they're finding the content that I make valuable, which is awesome. And I think where I'm gonna try and keep my focus, because I feel like there are a number of amazing content creators in this space, but I do think there's an opportunity for someone to be the voice of new players just getting into the game. I got to PTCGO and like, how do I play decks that don't suck? I got to PTCG Live. What do I play? Like, I kind of want to try and be the voice and a source of information for that type of player. And I hope that if you are an experienced player, that you can find some value with the content I make here as well. And going forward, what does the channel look like? I'm not quite sure just yet. there are a couple of factors that are going to impact the way the channel runs going forward. One of which is that my wife and I are expecting our baby pretty much any day now. This will be our first child. I'm taking some time off of work to help adapt our life to accommodate for the little bundle of joy, which is amazing. But I don't know what type of time I will have for making videos. Odds are it's probably not going to be as much as I put in right now. This year, I've kind of gotten it to a point where I can do 5 videos a week. I don't know if I can do that for the foreseeable future, but we'll see. And then the other part is PTCG Live. If we were just sticking with PTCGO, I think I would be content making content in that space. But I really don't like PTCG Live. I think the game is a ugly, buggy mess. I do like the ideas of crafting and getting away from the trading system, which is horrible, but there are so many issues that I have with PTCG Live, from the ugly graphics, from the weird roundabout ways of getting credits, and like pretty much you can only play the free decks, or you know exactly which types of code packs or pack codes to buy from Potown store in order to get the most credits so you can actually play the game. And I hate that too. And right now it's pretty much just celebrations or bust, and all of those codes are not easy to find at all. So I think that I will definitely have to do some soul searching in the next few months to see if I stick with the Pokemon TCG stuff. But I think there's still a lot of time for us to explore the game and share our thoughts and feelings and try out some new decks and help players get into the game if that's what they're interested in. So yeah, that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you so much for an incredible 2022. I can't thank you enough for everything you've given me, especially your time. You could be watching any other YouTube content creator or Pokemon TCG streamer that is better at playing the game, better at explaining things, more funny, all of that stuff. But you spent time with me, and I mean, you probably spent time with them too, but you spent some of that time with me, and that means so much to me. And I thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Quick plugs before we go. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at In Third Person. You can find me on Twitch at In Third Person, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website, inthirdperson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. That's it for me. Thank you so much. Have a happy have a happy new year. I'll see you all on the other side of the calendar, not the other side. Anyway, later.